All right, this is a quick review on The Queen's Apprenticeship. It's a book by Tracy Ryan. It's historical fiction placed in the 16th century, following two women. One is the Queen of Navarre, Marguerite de Navarre, and another one is a cast-out child. So there's two storylines that unfold. I love historical fiction, and I love history of the 15th and 16th century. Marguerite, of course, was influential and impactful on the Reformation, but this is the only book I could find where she was one of the primary characters in man's written history. There was some Dumas, the French author Dumas, wrote some books where Marguerite makes an appearance, but outside of Tracy Ryan's book, there is nothing else that deals with Marguerite. So the context of this story is 16th century, primarily France. Marguerite was the sister of Francois I. That was the king of France during the Reformation. That is the same Francis I, or Francois I, that Calvin wrote his dedication to in his Institutes, both in the first edition and the second edition. I'll summarize the characters that are based on historical record of Marguerite's family. Beginning with her father, his name was Charles d'Angoulême. He was the Count of Angoulême, and he was the cousin to King Louis VII of France. So there's an interesting story that unfolds, not in this book, but in history itself, that accounts for how Francois, her little brother, became ultimately the King of France. Marguerite's mom, who is a predominant character in this story, is Louise de Savoie. She was the child of the House of Savoy. And of course, her little brother, Francois, he was the King of France, and Marguerite and Francois had a very close relationship.
Any of you guys call me Francis, and I'll kill you.
That's indicated in the book, and historical records seem to suggest that as well. It's fascinating. There are letters, hundreds of letters from Marguerite preserved that are still accessible today. You can access them. Marguerite's first husband was Charles d'Alençon, and he was the Duke of Alençon, and that marriage resulted in no children. I don't remember how many years. It was like a 14-year marriage, 16-year marriage, something like this. And then no children as a result. Marguerite, in her letters, not alluded to in the book, but the author, Tracy Ryan, clearly did a lot of research. Again, Marguerite's letters are available. She doesn't speak too favorably about Charles, her first husband. And then Henry, her second husband, or Henri d'Albret, was the King of Navarre, and with Henri she had two of her children. Her daughter was the firstborn, was Jeanne d'Albret. Jean, just like Jean Calvin, but pronounced slightly different. She had a son as well that died in infancy. Her firstborn son died in infancy, Jean d'Albret. And then through her daughter, Jeanne, she had a grandson, Henry, who ultimately became the King of France. And although Henri and her daughter, Jeanne, really make not much of an appearance in this story, the hope would be that Tracy Ryan, the author here, would do a second volume, because Marguerite's daughter, Jeanne d'Albret, she went on to become the Queen of Navarre, but she was an adamant supporter and outspoken person in the Reformation tradition. She became a Protestant and Reformed by way of conviction. Marguerite was born on April 11, 1492. She passed away in 1549. She's a fascinating person to follow her history. She's written a number of books that are still available. The Hexameron, the original is 5-volume set, which is available online. This is a fictional account that she wrote. This is, again, a 16th century fictional account that she wrote. She wrote another book called The Mirror of the Sinful Soul, initially under a pseudonym. This is alluded to in the book, but it was later published. It got her into all sorts of trouble. The Queen's Apprenticeship is a quick read. It's just over 300 pages, large font, but I read it in a couple days, and it flows quickly. Again, if you're fascinated by the 16th century, if you like historical fiction, this is an enjoyable book to read, and you really do absorb the environment and context which unfolded. Tracy Ryan does a great job capturing some of the, and true to history. So, for instance, her brother Francois was sympathetic to Protestantism, to the Reformation movement in France, but Tracy goes through the story of the placards, the Night of the Placards, where Francois I switched radically and became very antagonistic to the Protestant movement, no longer became sympathetic, and that's captured very well in this book. So if those sorts of things interest you, or you just want to absorb the history in a way that's a little bit different than a history book in itself, this is a glorious complement. Highly recommended. Enjoy.